Hey everyone, it's Pastor Matt again. This week we're going to be going over the sermon discussion guide for Sunday, December 8th. Now this is the second of a three-part series going through Jonah. And so December 8th, Jason went through chapter 2 of Jonah, and then this next Sunday, Alex will be closing this up with chapter 3 and 4 in one message, and then boom, right into Christmas. So this message is titled The Belly of the Beast. The big idea is that we learn that we can get closer to God through hardship. That's the biggest takeaway. So go ahead and pull up your sermon discussion guide on the side window or print it out like I did here, and we'll go through it in the next couple of minutes. The share your story, the two icebreaker questions there. How have various hardships in your life helped get you to where you're at today? And then what have you learned about God as you look back on your past hardships? And so this is really to get people warmed up to contemplating on their past hardships. A lot of our people maybe kind of stuff those memories or try to avoid them. And so this is kind of to really warm up their reflective mind, right, to help get us to dig into this. Then we go to hear God's story. The first question there, according to Jonah's prayer recorded here, how did God use the time of hardship to teach Jonah and strengthen his faith? And so for this, I put 1:17 through 2:10. So it's all of chapter 2, but it's also the last verse of chapter 1. They call that kind of a pericope, a bookend. And so the last verse on chapter 1 is where Jonah gets swallowed by the big fish. And then it's all his prayer in the belly of the fish, and then it closes out by the fish ceremoniously vomiting him out. And so kind of reading that whole thing. Now, the trick to this question is to look at God in Jonah's prayer here. And so Jonah's praying, and always ask yourself, what can I learn about God? How can I see God move in this while I read this? And then number 2, Jonah here could be no lower as expressed in his poetic language of being in Sheol, also called the place of the dead. So ancient Hebrew thought their idea of the end times, or also when we die, we can say, yeah, we go to heaven or hell, and we have like 1,000 different theological views, right? They're like, yeah, when you die, whether you're good or bad, you go to the place of the dead. And it wasn't really developed, and they didn't really question it because they were very more simple-minded theologically than we are now in our analytic age. So Sheol, that's the place of the dead. Now in verse 6, we notice a turn followed by a glimpse into Jonah's heart here in verses 7 and 9. You read through this verse in chapter 6, the second part of verse 6 was kind of the hinge. And then he was like, then God did this, and then boom, this big change in Jonah's heart here. And so we're going to be looking at that. How does the hope mentioned in verse 6 relate to the heart that pleases God expressed in verses 7 to 9? So you're really looking at the heart of Jonah in the second question. Now in question 3, looking at verses 8 to 9, going through again that chapter, Jonah uses the first person verbal forms like I will sacrifice, I have vowed, I will pay. And before this, Jonah redirected his heart, focused on hardship, to instead be focused on thankfulness amidst hardship. So there's that turn that we just looked at in number 2. Now he resolves here in 8 to 9 to act from that thankfulness. And so when we choose to do this in our times of hardship, what difference does it make? And so basically you're panning out, okay, that sounds great. Why does any of this matter? How is it applicable? That's the meaning. And then create your own story. What's one takeaway for you this week about what you can do in times where you're in the belly of life? Then number 2, this week, spend some time alone writing your own belly of the beast prayer, like Jonah's prayer recorded in our lesson today. So that's a challenge that Jason gave in his sermon. Now, for the sake of dialogue in your group, the second part of that is, what do you think the hardest part about this exercise will be for you? You can say, okay, yeah, we're going to do this, sure, but then, okay, yeah, do you have time in your schedule to do this, or have you ever really reflected in this way on your hardships? So that's number 2. And then you flip it over, going deeper. Where's that book? Oh, there it is. I'll be right back. That's awkward. All right, so I'm quoting from this book, one of my favorite books on suffering. I read a lot about suffering and evil, and so this is probably one of the most uplifting books on suffering by Paul Tripp. And so there's a section there that I wrote after a little reflection. The basic idea on this going deeper section is that suffering changes us if we allow it to change us in the right way. And so suffering will always change us, whether it be good or bad, whether it be a lot more closed up, angry towards others, animosity driven, things like this, or we'll use our suffering to become a lot more compassionate towards others, more empathetic towards others, a little bit quieter, more eager to listen, more eager to and able to sit with others when they are in the belly of their hardship. And so it really comes down to the decision we have as humans when we suffer on, okay, what am I going to use? How am I going to go through this? And then what am I going to learn from it? And how am I going to let it to shape me as I invite God into it? And so there's 4 questions there. I really want to focus on the 4th question there. If you really hit any of them, and I set it up with a little paragraph there, but the gist is, how can we better prevent our external circumstances from impacting and defining our internal faith? And I ask this because I talk to a lot of people and they say, okay, I'm going through all this hardship in my life, and therefore they let that inform their faith and shape how they view God and all this stuff, rather than vice versa. Vice versa would be, I have my faith, I see God in this way, I have my relationship with him, and therefore anything that happens externally is just secondary. I can go through any of that because I have this internal rock. And so it's kind of getting our participants to see how where they're coming from. You're coming from a heart that's grounded, or you're coming from the fickle external circumstances you're allowing to shape your heart that God wants you to instead look to as an anchor. So there's a lot there, but that's the gist. Let me know if you have any questions and enjoy it.